All right. Hello, everyone watching this video. Hey, we're going to jump right into it. Today's video is going to be over the contract to buy and sell real estate residential. It is 2026, so let's get another video made for the most relevant contract. So the office that I am working for right now, we are using Bold Trail as our CRM. So this is not a Bold Trail training. However, if you are listening to this, you probably could slow this down, pause it, and learn a few things, or at least, I guess, learn my ways of how I'm getting into this and getting into our contract. So let's just dive in. Go ahead and click on login. You can do one of two things right here. You can log into the platform, which is basically the CRM side of things, or you can log into the back office, which is where we're going to head today for the contracts. But I know that most of us are agents. Most of us are working through our CRM in there. And so we're going to log in through the CRM and show you how to get to the transactional side of things or the documents from the CRM side of things. Oh boy. Well, I just wanted to show you how to log in, but now it's taking way too much time. Okay, so once the front page of the CRM loads, I want to show you there's two different ways, or there's actually three different ways to get into the back office. The first way that I've pretty much grown accustomed to is going to Bold Trail back office right here, or type it in if it's not coming up on your frequently searched. Just type in Bold Trail or back office, and you'll see under my products. If you do not have this, reach out to Sherry at our office or myself, and we'll get you access to it, but everybody should have access to it. So you can go here, or you can go over here to deals, and you can go create a transaction. And if I clicked on this button here, this would ask me a few questions and take me to the back office. But like I said, for the sake of this video, we're not training on Bold Trail per se. The other way to do it is if you are in your contact, you have a contact, you can click in and you can create one. I thought I had done the account in here, but apparently I don't. So let's just go the way that I've been habitually doing this through the search bar, Bold Trail back office. And as I said before, I want to slow down for just a second. Your login is the same login for both portals, the CRM side of things as well as the back office. Once you're in the back office, don't worry about all the things that I can see. I just have that account that allows us to see everything. You would see all of your transaction files right here. And like I said, for today, we're just starting a brand new thing. And we're going to go over just the contract to buy and sell. And with that contract, typically you're writing that as a buyer's agent and sending it over to the selling side. I'm going to go up here to create a transaction. I'm going to go create new. If you did notice, hold on a sec. There is a search for the MLS. So if you do have the address, go ahead and search it in the MLS. I'm going to go ahead and create new and just kind of walk you through exactly how I've learned to do it. So transaction type, it's going to be a traditional sale. If you're probably looking at anything else outside of a traditional sale, definitely give me a shout, give me a call. The other thing that I want to note is that if you have a referral, if you're looking at Bold Trail and you're working on a referral, you're actually going to go ahead and click traditional sale because typically the referral partner or agent you're working with is probably going to be doing a traditional sale. You can select the status. If I'm writing the contract, then that means I'm already working and active with that buyer client. So I'm going to go ahead and put active. Opportunity would be a buyer lead. Maybe I'm working on an exclusive right to buy or exclusive right to sell, which those videos are coming up soon. I am representing the buyer in this situation. And as you'll notice, there's a lot of things that I can leave blank, but it does want a transaction name. If you've noticed over here on the left-hand side where all of our agents are putting in these files, right now you're writing the contract for the buyer for a specific address, but I'm not recommending putting the specific address in just yet because your buyer may or may not get this offer. And so I think it might be wise to just use the buyer's name here. And, maybe wherever they're looking, let's say it's, Loveland. Anyways, these are just rules of thumb. You can absolutely change this later on. But like I said, for the sake of this video, let's talk through this and let's get to that contract. A few other additional fields you can absolutely go through, but I'm going to click next. If you know what percentage you are getting, go ahead and start to select those types of things. A lot of times you're not understanding exactly what the selling side is taking if you're on the buy side. So go ahead and put your buyer's agent compensation in there. Next. And then we need to add that contact. So like I said, I'm just going to do a little dummy account, like using the fake name Blake Smith. And you can create new. And then you can have a few different things. I'm going to go ahead and put in an email address. Hopefully it doesn't trick the system, since my agent side of things will have the same email address. But definitely put an email address in at the very least when you're adding the contact in. Obviously, you should be working to fulfill most of this. But the main source of what I'm trying to get at with the email is when we go to send out documents for signature, it makes it a lot easier if you already have that in there. All right, once you have all your contacts, if you have a second buyer, third buyer, fourth buyer, go ahead and add contact. Make sure you designate who they are and continue to add those names. All right, so now it's going to ask me for what type of checklist am I looking for. And this is what I was saying before. If I want to slow down my words a little bit. At the beginning, it said, what type of sale is this? And we select traditional sale. I've had a couple of different people reach out and wonder how we do the referral side of things. And that is going to be where you click this checklist drop down and you scroll down and hit click on referral. For the sake of this video, I don't want that referral, but that's how you do it. So I just wanted to add that into this video here a little bit. But we're going to go ahead and do buyer residential. The listing date. So what does this mean? What do you mean by listing date? Buyer residential. This is not the date that the house was listed, the house that you are working on the contract for. This is the date that you have listed or signed with your buyer through the exclusive right to buy. And so we're going to go ahead and just say that we started working with this buyer on April Fool's Day. Create. And then it's going to have all of this stuff kind of in blank. And what you'll see here is all the things that I kind of skipped over, glossed over for the sake of the video's time. But when you have a buyer, fill this stuff out to the best of your ability. And you can also edit it. And so if you, like I said, you can always come back to these things and add things in as you keep going. And that's how you do that edit. So yours shouldn't look completely blank like mine. But for the sake of the video, we're going to keep rolling. Go down here to documents. When you're under documents, this is going to show you all of the different types of documents that you're going to need for that client. And so again, today we're just looking at the contract to buy and sell real estate residential. So click on that. You can click use forms here. You can click use forms up here. Doesn't matter. From there, it's going to have the PDF for that contract already ready. And the reason why you would use this in our own forms is because our office is taking diligent time with Bold Trail to get these fields mapped out to where you can fill them in. And you'll see what I mean by that in a second. Okay. So I am the broker, and my buyer is Mr. Blake Smith. Again, if you have other signer, if you have other people, they should show up here. But this is talking about the signers. So sometimes you will be working with a couple of clients, maybe the elderly, maybe a kid who's buying their first property, and the parents want to be, in on things, but only one person signing. So the other side was to add all contacts that are receiving these documents, and this is the portion where you're going to put in all of the signers for the contract. Go ahead and click next. That's going to open up the contract itself. So let me show you guys how to fill these things out, as well as best practices to help you guys as you're working through these different contracts. So this is the contract to buy and sell real estate residential. If you notice, this was just changed on January 1st, 2026. That is why I am creating this new video. So if you've seen all of my past videos, please disregard them. Let me know where they're at. I'll try to work to get them down. It's actually on my big task for 2026 is to go through all of my video library. But this is what you're looking to use moving forward for all buyers that you're working with or all sellers that you're obtaining offers through. So go ahead and if yours does not pre-populate this, you probably better reach out to the office. But anyways, if it doesn't, go ahead and type in the date, the date that you are writing the offer today. This is not the date that you are getting it signed and all of that. This is the date that you're writing it. You're going to notice in section 1, there's nothing there. So again, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to explain exactly what these clauses mean. I'm going to explain to you exactly how to fill this out. I know there's been some requests for shorter videos on all of this, so that way I can have you guys just be able to fill out a contract very quickly. I'm already rambling, so let's keep going. Type in your buyer's name if it's not populated there. Joint tenants, tenants in common, or other. You should know exactly what you're doing by now, but however, if you are a new agent, I totally understand. So there are a few things I'll probably explain here, but I'm not going through every single clause. Joint tenants, I would say, is the right of survivorship. And so traditionally, not always, we would put this under for married couples or people that absolutely understand that, you know, if one of them should pass away, the other one gets full rights to the property. And so typically investors don't like joint tenants, and we'd look to do tenants in common. And so tenants in common would mean that if one person should pass away, the other person's will, or in a court of probate, would, I guess, award or place that portion of the property into someone else's possession. So again, a lot of times tenants in common are for maybe boyfriend and girlfriend who aren't necessarily sure exactly where their life is headed together, or possibly investors. So anyways, be careful what you're selecting there. Most of the time, married couples absolutely would like to prefer joint tenants. Since Blake Smith is a single gentleman here, we're going to go ahead and select other and put in tenant in severalty. Tenant in severalty is fine, or you can place and just put severalty. That's okay there. One of the things that I want to show you just real quick, again, trying not to make this a bullet trail thing, but I can't help but take some opportunities here. Fill in now is obviously what I'm filling in right now, but if you ever have a document where you need the buyer or seller to actually fill something in, you can click this, and then you can select whether or not, like, this is going to be something that you fill out as the agent after this document is sent, or if your buyer or your seller needs to fill out something, go ahead and click them then. But for the sake of this video, we're just pretty much going to be in fill now type of arena. And this is what I meant by the pre-populated template that we have in our system. It allows you to basically type into these blanks of this PDF. And so seller, what would we put in here for seller? I'm going to put the seller's full name, but here's what I'm going to do for the sake of the video. As I fill things out like this, I'm just going to go ahead and put in what's best practice. So seller's name as it reads in public. All right. There are two ways and two thoughts around public records. And what do I mean by public record? I mean what the county has. So if this is in Weld County, I'm going to go to Weld County Public Records or Weld County Assessor's Records search and search for the seller there with the address. I don't tend to like to use the IRIS or RE Colorado's public records page. That page is called Realist, and Realist is not part of the county. And Realist actually tries to pull information from the county's public records. So in all of my videos and all of my trainings, I'm a big proponent of making sure you guys go and pull information from the source, from the county. I'm not saying that that's always correct, but at the end of the day, Realist pulls information from there and can be incorrect oftentimes. Not all the time, but I've seen it multiple times. So public records is absolutely what I shout to the rooftops. All right, moving right along. This property, we're just going to be making up a property. I don't think this is going to be for sale, but it's in the county of, let's say, Boulder. And this is where you type in the legal description. This is not the common address. So the common address is going to come down here. And let's just say it's one of the old addresses, 126 Fort, Longmont, Colorado. Zip code was 805. for. All right, but as far as the legal description goes, that's also going to be something that you find in public records. So so I just put a little note here. Again, you know, I'm a big proponent of public records for everything, and one of the things that you need to be aware of with the MLS is in the MLS listing, there is a portion and section in there that shows the legal description. However, you've got a couple different humanistic errors that may happen, as well as system errors. Sometimes legal lot and blocks, or I'm sorry, legal descriptions, well, they're not always lot and blocks, but legal descriptions are very long and very lengthy, and sometimes the character limitations of the MLS don't allow the listing agent to copy and paste the full thing. The other thing, if you've ever done anything and had, you know, you're a human and we all make mistakes. And sometimes the listing agents may only copy a portion of it or miss the first letter or the first number, whatever that looks like. So public records for sure. All right, moving right along. When it comes to inclusions or exclusions, this is going to be where you type in the amount of garage remote controls you're requesting from the seller. If it's a 2-car garage, I love asking for, you know, 2 garage remotes. If it is a 3-car garage, I guess you don't have to spell out remotes, but if it is a 3-car, obviously I'm going to ask for 3. Or sometimes you're going to see other people that say, you know, any. I like to use a specific amount, 3 working. But as you can see, there's multiple different ways to fill that out. 3 working, I think, is the most proper, in that, you know, you don't ever want to do what I did and get to closing table where a seller pulled a Ziploc bag out and said, "We are sorry, on the way over here, we actually dropped it out of our car. We ran over with our tire. And here you go. We fulfilled our obligations of the contract. This is a remote. However, it doesn't work anymore." So anyways, 3 working or 2 working or whatever working is applicable, move right along. Now this one here, be careful. A lot of times I'm seeing where people are selecting one of these boxes and they're not fully understanding. This box is saying that if the owners have a solar panel system, that system is included and 100% paid off. It's not encumbered. You got to be careful selecting some of these boxes, because if there is a solar panel system, they're not, and they're being paid off. They're not technically owned by the seller yet. So owned means owned out, free and clear of any liens or encumbrances. And so let's pretend that there is a solar panel on the property, but the sellers have not paid it fully off. You're actually going to go down here in under leased items or under encumbered inclusion. So if they're paying on it and it's not being leased, you're going to put it in here. If they are leased, you're going to put in here. And then also under solar power plan down here in section 2.9, you're going to have to select that box. Be very careful for these tricky left-hand check boxes. I want you to understand this loud and clear. I can't recite this enough. If there is a solar power plan and you select one of these boxes right here, will or will not, I strongly believe the buyer shouldn't assume it, but maybe this negotiation between the buyer and seller. But if you select this box and not this box, in all technicality, and I don't understand why, but this is basically legalese or license law, this clause doesn't apply. So by selecting that box, it enacts this clause to apply to the contract. So whenever you're filling out anything in these contracts and there is a left-hand side checkbox on the same line as that header, select that box. All right, so for the sake of this example, I did say that there's a solar power. We are having the seller go ahead and pay that off, because the buyer's not going to assume those obligations. And let's just say that it is leased. Be careful here. Any inclusions owned by the seller must be conveyed at closing by the seller free and clear of all taxes, liens, and encumbrances, except. So if you want the buyer to go ahead and pay off the solar power plan, but the solar power plan is not yet paid off, don't put it in here. This is saying that, hey, we're basically saying, hey, look, we don't, as the buyer, we're actually not asking you to pay it off. So read that again. Any inclusions owned by the seller must be conveyed at closing free and clear of all liens and encumbrances, taxes, except solar power plan. So don't put solar power plan in there. Make sure you have this selected up here and go ahead and select that box up here. So as you can see, if there's anything that you're thinking you need to select up here, you kind of need to understand whether or not you should or shouldn't, then come down here and read the applicable box, whether it's encumbered or leased. Let's look at leased items. The following personal property is currently leased to the seller, which will be transferred to the buyer. So again, this doesn't say that everything's going to be paid. This is going to be transferred to the buyer. So if your buyer's not wanting to assume it, a very contradictory type of contract would be if you put in here a solar panel system, and then down here in section 2.5.9, you say that the buyer will not assume the seller's obligation. But up here, it kind of says that you are assuming that obligation. So make sure you don't write up contradictory contracts and just understand what you're reading. And like I said, we're filling out the contract today. And there are so many different clauses we're just going to skim by because there's nothing to fill out. So make sure you're reading everything and make sure you understand exactly what your contract is reading. And the number one thing is to not have I call a hypocritical contract. All right, let's go right back up here. So we have solar panels, water softeners, security systems, satellite systems. Just think through, are you asking for these to be paid off? Are they actually on the property? I know that a lot of times you got people with security systems like ADT or Verizon or whatever's out there, but sometimes that security system isn't operable. The seller is taking it with them. So again, remember, this is going to be more for if that that security system is coming with the property. Let's move right along. I do see another opportunity to talk about. Whenever there's a document with initial areas, you're going to go ahead and need to have those initials each page. Some documents won't have any section for those initials, and on our office, First Realty Associates Inc., we do not require initials if the section or if the document doesn't call them out. But since this document is calling them out, we're going to go ahead and make that mandatory and put them in there. So all I'm trying to get at is you will see other contracts from other offices and other brokers who don't have the initial spots down at the bottom of the page. Perfectly fine not to use them then, but if it shows that there should be initials like it's being called out here, then you should have those on there. Other inclusions. So this is where you're going to put in all of the proper inclusions. And what I say by proper is depending upon if you have a loan or it's cash, you need to know how to fill this out. If it's cash, you can almost put in whatever you'd like. You can add in trampolines, you can add in the set, the weight bench, the home theater in the basement. If you're working with a lender and you have a loan on or there's going to be a loan on the property with a lender with the buyer, that lender is really going to be scrutinous around what goes in here. So the rule of thumb is all appliances that are being included in the kitchen and possibly the deep freeze, but don't put all appliances. That is very vague. That's a very loose way of writing your contract. That's a very poor way of writing your contract. And so what you want to do is spell out each individual I can't type anyways and type and talk, let alone. You're going to type out each individual appliance. So I'm going to say kitchen, side by side fridge. Is it fridge or refrigerator? Now that one I don't think anybody really cares about. So I'm a refrigerator type of guy, so spell it out, whatever that looks like. Also, you might have an oven. You might have an oven, but you also might have a cooktop. But what if you don't have an oven that's separate? So that would be considered a stove range oven. So as you can see, you can get very specific, and you should get very specific in here. But again, if there's a lender, you're probably spelling out all kitchen appliances, and then it's okay to add the deep freeze in the basement, the wine cooler in the basement, washer and dryer, also closed washer and dryer, I should say, are also very applicable. If the property has a garbage disposal, put garbage disposal, dishwasher, microwave, so on and so forth. You guys can look at the MLS and use your best judgment. If this box is checked, the buyer and seller concurrently agreed into a separate agreement for additional personal property outside of this contract. So, like I said, if it's a cash deal, you can almost write in anything you want in this section here. If it's not, and there is a loan, and let's pretend that the buyer would like the weight bench down in the basement. Don't put weight bench up here, or the lender will flag it. Go ahead and select this and do a bill of sale for the weight bench, and do it for, say, $10 or whatever, buyer and seller agreed to, I guess. But $10 is a general rule of thumb. You can't have an adequate bill of sale at $0. It has to be something billed. So $1. I think the rule of thumb is $10 anymore to be like viable in a court of law. But anyways, I'm no attorney. I just know that you need to select that box. You need to fill out a bill of sale. And if your clients are negotiating over price, maybe they should seek legal counsel around how much they should pay for that personal property. All right, moving right along. Inclusions which are encumbered, we already looked at that. So if these are something, if there's a solar panel system that your buyer is willing to take over the solar panel payments on, you're going to go ahead and put it in there and deselect this box up here. So make sure that if your buyer is taking over those payments, you put it down here and make sure that this is not selected. Otherwise, you would have a contradictory contract. Same thing with leased items. Go ahead and put it in here if it's being leased. But let's look at this will or will not spot. Buyer will or will not assume the debt obligations under the inclusion subject to buyer's review of 6 inclusion documents. So keep note, section 10.6 is going to be our due diligence section, and we'll kind of come to that here in a little bit. Personal property conveyance. Conveyance for all personal property will be the bill of sale. So that's kind of what we were talking about with this checkbox up here. I don't know why this isn't is sandwiched into this up here, but again, want to make sure that you guys notice how the contract can absolutely read from itself. Parking and storage facilities, the use or ownership of the following parking facilities. So parking, so this would be a 2-car attached garage, 3-car detached garage. You name it, that's where you're going to put more of the garage style things. Maybe it's a 1-car carport. Over here, it's the, let's do another, slow down a bit and talk about maybe a condo or townhome where you have the parking spot, right? You would say the use or ownership of the following parking facilities. You would say maybe lot number 301B or parking space. You'll see these things labeled all different ways. But anyways, make sure you type that out if they are looking at a condo or townhome. If not, if they're not, obviously you're going to be using the garage space. Over here is going to be the following storage facilities. This would be like your barns, your Quonset huts, your chicken coops, any ancillary accessory building that's not really considered a garage. This is those. Lease items we already talked about. Let's keep rolling. Exclusions. I'm a big fan of putting seller's personal property in here, regardless of if that property is vacant or not. So that's my general rule of thumb. And then from there, it's very similar to the inclusions, except for there are a lot of times things that the sellers want to specifically exclude. And maybe there's some times that the buyers want to specifically exclude something. So seller's personal property should be, like I just preach this on the mountaintop, should be on all of your contracts. Doesn't necessarily have to be, since the contract is for real property and not personal property. But I think having this in there just allows and makes it very clear to the seller that you're not accepting any of their garbage or trash that they want to leave behind. The only other types of things that you commonly see is, clothes washer and dryer. Um, see plenty of other things that want to be excluded, and each property is going to be kind of specific on that. Move along. Section 2.7, many times, often, you will never really probably use these sections except for section 273, well rights. So if there's a well on the property, it's going to ask you down here for the well permit number. Sometimes when you're writing this contract, you have the well permit number. It's usually like a 5 or 6 digit number. But many times you might not know that at this point, so you can say to be determined. Now, if I fill this out like this, there is something wrong that I want you guys to notice. And this is, again, me harping on these stupid left-hand side checkboxes. But if I were to put this in, or the well permit, or the well permit number of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, this actually is not correct because we have to select that box. So if there's a well on the property, make sure that box is selected. Anytime there's a left-hand checkbox. Frustrating part about our contracts is some sections have a left-hand checkbox, and as you can see, other ones do not have a left-hand checkbox. So make sure you slow down, use your best judgment, and move on. So let's pretend that this house does have a well. We're using that well permit number, perfectly fine. If there is other water-related rights to the property, probably give myself a call, give Joanna a call. We're going to help you through how to fill this out because you're working with the buyer, and a lot of times the buying side just knows that there is water rights with the property, but the buying agent typically won't know exactly how to fill this out until we talk to the seller about what exactly those rights look like. The other caveat that I want to talk to you about with water in regards to water rights is the same conversation I want to have with you around mineral rights. There's water rights or mineral rights that are kind of being talked about or looked at with a property that you're going under contract with. Make sure you advise your buyer in writing, whether it be text message or email, that they need to seek attorney counsel to absolutely make sure that the water or mineral rights are going to be transferred and conveyed at closing the way that the buyer sees fit. So this contract is for the real property, which is basically your surface rights and above, and not your subsurface rights. And so you're definitely going to have an attorney involved. If the buyer does not want to get an attorney involved, that's why you need to have a recommendation in writing that says they should seek legal counsel for the proper transfer of those rights to them. If they don't seek that proper counsel, those rights may not be transferred to them, and you don't want to be on the hook for improper, transfer of these rights in which your buyer thought that all of the rights were being transferred just because of section 2.7. All right, I digress. Water stuff, give me a call, I'll help you out. All right, dates and deadlines, the meaty section of our contract. But again, for today's sake and time, I'm not going to explain exactly all these things to you. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here, I'm going to fill out the most common dates and deadlines that you use, and I'm going to give you rules of thumb. So whatever I type over here is not what you're actually typing in the contract. So time of day deadline, I don't actually use this, but I know some agents do. This means that your deadlines are going to be at 8 p.m. if you type at 8 p.m., 7 p.m. I don't typically use this deadline. I don't really care for this deadline. But what I mean by myself filling this out, let's look at alternative earnest money deadline. You can actually use a hard date. So today is April 16th. Let's say earnest money needs to be turned in by tomorrow, Friday, April 17th. You're going to go ahead and type in April 17th. So that's how you, pay attention to my words right now. That's how you should be filling out the contract with hard dates. So this is an example of a hard date. I'm going to go ahead and leave this hard date in there. I'm also going to put what I'm going to use for the rest of the following dates, and there's a rule of thumb. I would say that this is anywhere between 1 and 3 days. I'll go ahead and do from mutual execution of the contract. So this is a good general rule of thumb to use while you're filling out your alternative earnest money deadline. The other thing, or not the other thing, sorry, I don't know what I forgot. With off-record and record title matters, the best rule of thumb, so if I was writing this contract today, I'd probably be putting in somewhere around next week, next Thursday, next Friday. And so that date, let's say the 23rd. So this, I might use April 23rd, and I might use April 23rd here. But like I said, most of the time, these dates are fluid, and they don't have to be exactly 7 days. So I like anywhere from 6 to 10 days on this. And I'm just going to go ahead. Six to 10 days for MEC. This one is going to be the objection to the record title. So this should be sometime after So this one should be sometime after you receive that title. And so I would say anywhere between 8 to 12 days. This one's going to be the exact same as the top one because off record and record title matters, I believe, should be able to be delivered to the buyer in relatively the same amount of time. All right, so once you get through all of your title stuff, you may have an objection. If you have an objection, the objection absolutely needs to be after all of this stuff. So it's going to be pushed out even further. So 13 days. Sometimes in rare cases, you can shorten this stuff up. Again, these are general rules of thumb, but something being put into this area should suffice as sending over to the seller. Third-party right to approve and purchase. This would be for loan assumption and things that we're not going to get into with this video. So again, I'm going to fill out this contract with the most common dates and deadlines. There are a lot of HOAs out there. And so the rule of thumb for me is around 14 days. And then you need the documents, but then you need to give your buyer enough time to be able to state whether they're going to terminate. So make sure you don't put this same deadline as 14 days. You might be able to put it maybe 2 to 3 days after the association deadline. So with this one example, it's 14 days. Let's go ahead and do 17 days from the mutual execution of contract. Seller disclosures. So this is going to be the seller's property disclosure. In the world of what we live in, most listing agents are working to have the seller fill that out right around the time that the property is listed or going under contract. And so a good rule of thumb here is somewhere between 3 to 7 days from the mutual execution of the contract. So if I'm writing this contract today, I actually might reiterate, I'm not using the right things for you guys. I'm just doing rules of thumb. I might put in there April 23rd and make them submit that to me by next week. Lead-based paint. Leave this blank if the property is built before 1979. If the property, leave this blank if the property is built after 1979. If the property was built before 1979, a good rule of thumb on this lead-based paint disclosure is to follow the seller's property disclosure date. Or 3 to 7 days after MEC. All right, moving right along, new loan application deadline. So this would be where you're working with a buyer. You should have some sort of pre-approval before you go out and show the buyer properties. However, that loan application is not complete until there's an executed contract. And so we always use the same as we do with the earnest money above. We do about 1 to 3 business days after MEC. All right, new loan terms deadline. So once the application is done, within the next 72 hours or 3 days, the loan terms deadline should be pumped out. And so that date should be anywhere between 3 to 7 days from mutual execution. So again, MEC means mutual execution of contract. All I mean by that is 3 to 7 days outside of probably when you're writing this. Like I said, it's April 16th. And so these dates would be somewhere around, following next week. New loan availability. So I'm going to switch it up on you. I just used the term MEC, but now this date, and there's only a very few dates in here that I use and work backwards from the contract. So before I fill out new loan availability, I actually do like to figure out when my closing date might be. And so if you're anything like me, I don't like to close at the very end of a month, and I do not like to close on Fridays or Mondays. Mondays are just Mondays, and Fridays, you don't want anything to happen and then have to delay closing to the next business day, which would be the following Monday. So if I'm looking at my calendar and we're looking at traditional closings are anywhere between, I say, like 27 to 45 days out. So if I'm looking at the calendar, and I know you guys can't see this, but I'm on the 16th of April, so I'm going to go somewhere near the 16th of May, which falls on a Saturday. So I'm not going to do that. I'm probably going to push it to the next week, Tuesday, May 19th. So now that I've got my closing date, then I can absolutely use that to determine when I want the new loan availability deadline. So the new loan availability deadline is typically 3 business days before closing. Or in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and put the actual date I would use if I was actually writing this contract. So if I'm closing Tuesday the 19th, I'm looking at Monday the 18th, Friday the 15th, Thursday the 14th. All right. So very important, new loan availability deadline should be only about 3 days before closing, if that. Sometimes selling agents will allow you to do 1 or 2 days before closing, but generally we usually run off about that 3-day mark. Buyer's credit information, disapproval, buyer's credit information, existing loan, loan transfer, seller private, all left blank for the sake of this video. If you're getting into the loan assumption side of things, or you're getting into seller financing, you're going to probably give me a call anyways, and we'll work through exactly how you're going to fill out these dates. So moving right along to appraisal. So if this property does have a loan or the cash deal and the buyer still wants to have an appraisal done, typically the appraisal area should be anywhere around 21 days from mutual execution of the contract. I'm a big fan of making sure that if there's an appraisal deficit from the contract, we should be able to send our objection in the same day. So anywhere between 21 to 22 days from mutual execution of contract should be your objection. And then I only like to give the buyer and seller about 24 hours to figure out how to resolve that price. Like if we're going to work to send the seller this whole contract, this 20 some odd page contract, and both buyer and seller are going to negotiate that within a 24-hour period, they certainly should be able to negotiate an appraisal deficit in a 24-hour period, because literally you're only negotiating one item. So this would be anywhere between 22 and 23 days, depending upon when my objection is. All right, for a survey, I'm going to just really simply skip over that. If you're going to use survey deadlines, use the same dates as the So this first deadline for a survey would be 21 days. The second objection would be the same as the appraisal objection, 21 to 22, and finally the resolution, 22 to 23. All right, water rights and mineral rights. Again, if you're getting involved with those, you're probably, and I'm highly encouraging you get me involved unless you've done that before. If an attorney is involved, the attorney should be telling you when they could examine all of those things. So for the sake of this video, we're leaving those two dates blank because the attorney should be the one directing us on exactly how far out we should put some of those deadlines. So let's focus in on inspection termination, objection, resolution real quick. So with the inspection termination objection, this should be the same day. So anywhere around about 7 days from mutual execution of contract should be your inspection, objection, and termination deadline. And remember, you need to probably make a relationship with an inspector, because if you have an inspector you like to use and they can do the inspection, say tomorrow on Friday, you may not want this to be fully 7 days out. The other thing to kind of note is that if your inspector can only fit you in next Thursday, April 23rd, 7 days is probably not long enough, because they need about 24 hours to do the inspection, the site visit at the property, and then produce the actual inspection report for you and your buyer to read and see if there's anything to object to or terminate to. Then down here, inspection resolution, this should be anywhere between, probably 2 to 3 days after that. So 7, let's do 9. So again, these are rules of thumb. You could do 6 days, you could do 8 days, you could do 7 days, you could do 9 days, you could do 10 days. Other things start to fall in your life. Property insurance termination deadline, I always do the same as inspection objection. This makes it pretty easy, and your buyer should 100%. I'm actually a very big advocate of this deadline and not being pushed out longer than the inspection objection deadline. So if I have a seller and someone as a buyer that brings me an offer, if that property insurance termination deadline is after the inspection deadline, they're going to really have to justify to me why, because this is an easy out for the buyer. So I like to make sure this is done before the inspection objection, because if the buyer's not going to like how inspection negotiations go, I don't want them to have an easy out here, because all this is working to gain an insurance quote for the property. And I could call my insurance broker right now and she could have a property insurance quote to me within the next 24 hours. So in all technicality, even 7 days is a lot of room, but I get it. People's lives are busy. Buyers are still, going under contract on homes. They're trying to move from their other home. So 7 days is adequate. I digress. Let's keep going. Due diligence. You want all these due diligence items before the inspection deadlines. So I like to make sure that this is probably 3 to 5 days. You need some time to object. So maybe this is more like 4 to 6 days. And then if you need to resolve something, you want to kind of get this stuff resolved before your inspection stuff is already going on, because you don't want the buyer to pay for an inspection when you're already going to terminate the contract based upon whatever you found in due diligence. So 7 days is pretty max for my world on that side of things. If you have a conditional sale, so this box here is if the buyer has a property to sell, in order to buy the property you're writing a contract for, be very careful with these closing dates, because this conditional sale deadline is for the closing of their house, not for them going under contract on a conditional sale. So a lot of times this is actually anywhere between like 45 and 60 days out. I'm not trying to confuse you guys with this. I know we used May 19th as our closing date. Basically to understand how to get the new loan availability deadline there, which is 3 days before that. But let's pretend that this is a contingent sale. This closing date is the same as the So mirror match. So if your buyer has a property to sell, and and that property is contingent upon the sale of their home, make sure it's the same as the conditional sale deadline. It should be this guy up here. Anyways, I hope that helps. I know I'm not going to get through all clarification in these videos, so give me a shout if there's something I say in these videos that don't make sense to you. I'm happy to go over it on the phone. But let's keep moving along. So possession date, back to May 19th, so you get this too. All right. If I am closing on May 19th, 2026, the possession date could be the same exact date that you're closing, or if there is a post-closing occupancy agreement, you're going to go ahead and put a different date. So let's just say that this property is closing on May 19th as well as possession is taking place. So if that's the case, if the possession date and closing date are the same, possession time, you can go ahead and put upon delivery of deed. You will see other agents put upon a delivery of deed and funding. I just put upon delivery of deed is in my heart of hearts and my entire soul that the delivery of the deed can't actually take place until liens and encumbrances are satisfied. And liens and encumbrances can't be satisfied unless there is funding. So I just never take the time to add in the words and funding. So upon delivery of deed is perfectly fine. The other thing that you'll see, I like it spelled out, but yeah, sometimes I feel a little lazy. Upon DOD, upon delivery of deed means the same thing. But again, I don't like to make any of my contracts ambiguous, so I like to put and type out things. And I can't type. All right. Acceptance deadline. I want to shout this one from the rooftops. Sounds like I'm always jumping on a soapbox when it comes to contracts, but that's who I am. The acceptance deadline. You guys, this is not a response deadline. This is an acceptance deadline. So if you ever write a contract, so let me just put this in and then I'll kind of jump on my soapbox for this. So I'm writing this, it's April 16th, and I'm going to give the sellers until April 17th. Always put the date. And I'm going to give them until 8 p.m. tomorrow. Don't set your buyer up to understand that, oh, we should hear back by the seller by 8 p.m. tomorrow night. Don't set them up like that. Just tell them that, hey, we may or may not hear back from the buyer by tomorrow. I would like to know if they'd like to accept our offer as is, that we do hear a response by tomorrow sometime before 8. But if the seller doesn't like something in our offer and they want to counter it, they absolutely can go past this deadline. All they're saying to us, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is they're not accepting our offer as is. So it's an acceptance deadline, not a response deadline. All right. Moving right along. Like I said, I'm going to be glossing over all sorts of things. So make sure you slow down and read these contracts. Ask Joanna, ask myself what some of this stuff means. As far as filling out this deadline here, if any deadline falls on a Saturday or Sunday or federal holiday, such deadline will or will not be extended to the next business day. Use your head, whatever you want to do. Personally, I don't like to make sure, I don't like deadlines that fall on a weekend, so I'm always a will proceed to the next day type of guy. You might be a will or not type of person. Price and terms. So up here, the purchase price set forth below is payable in U.S. dollars by the buyer as follows. Go ahead and put in the dollar amount. So let's say I'm offering $425,000 on the property. Again, this is already in U.S. dollars. So I don't have to put USD. I don't have to put any of those different things in there, but that's perfectly acceptable. Go down here, same thing, purchase price $425,000. And then your earnest money amount, typically is around 1 to 3% of the purchase price. But for the sake of easy math for myself today and teaching you guys some things, let's go ahead with $10,000. New loan. Let's pretend that this buyer is putting down a new loan. Is using a new loan. Doesn't really matter what type of loan. All we got to do is do some calculations on the percentage. So if they're doing a 20% down type of loan, then you would be putting in 80% of the purchase price, right? So 80% is coming from the loan, and they're putting 20% down. I oftentimes see this section missed, and I oftentimes see agents put the down payment amount in this area, not the actual loan amount. So 80% of $425,000 is $340,000. Again, if you're doing assumption, private financing, or seller financing, you're probably going to give me a call. So this is blank for the sake of the video. Now your cash at close. This is very important. Very important. Again, we get this messed up here oftentimes when we put in our down payment amount, and then we go down here, and now we look at this as being down payment, but this is actually your cash at closing. And since earnest money is part of the down payment, then this plus this plus this has to equal the 425. So I'm just going to slow this down for you guys to make sure you fully understand. So the total down payment for the buyer is $85,000. But what's going to go in this box is actually $75,000. Okay? I want you to see that. This doesn't say down payment, it says cash at close. And since $10,000 is already deposited, that's on behalf of the buyer as part of their down payment. So the total cash to close is your down payment less the earnest money, or in this case, $75,000, for a total purchase price of $425,000. It beats me why this has to go in so many different places, but it does put it in all places. So you got 425 here, 425 here, 425 here, 425 here. I think that these are designed, you guys, so that way when the seller receives this, they could clearly see what the buyer is trying to convey as far as the offer price goes. My only guess. Seller concession. So again, if you don't know what a seller concession is, you should absolutely be reaching out. But oftentimes, right now in this market, we are seeing folks ask for seller concession. In the multiple offer situation, I would imagine that you'll be leaving this blank more often than not. But one of the things to just note is this dollar amount should, I'm going to spell it all out, but this dollar amount should not exceed what's allowable by the lender. So I'm going to say ask the lender for the max amount. It doesn't go all the way over, but maybe I'll try to use it. All right, so ask the lender for the maximum amount. And here's why. If you put in a dollar amount that the lender cannot use, your buyer gets hosed because they actually have limitations. So if there's a loan, make sure you ask the lender for the maximum amount. If there's no loan, there really is no max, except for you got to be careful with the title company and that there is what's called an arm's length transaction. So you got to be careful if the cash buyer is trying to use the concession area very strategically for someone's behalf, because it could get flagged by the title company. So anyways, I digress. Let's work on earnest money. Earnest money is in the form of, I personally use good funds. You can be a lot more specific than I am. Good funds would be the good funds of whatever the title company uses. Some people put in check or wire here. Either one is perfectly acceptable. Held by, this is the title company that is set forth in the MLS or that the seller typically chooses. And so held by, I use First American Title. The one thing I just don't want to type in here is title company, because I don't want you guys to type in title company. Remember, I'm teaching you how to fill this out more of the rule of thumb. So make sure you spell out the actual title company. But since we are not biased and this is not a First American Title type of, I guess, advertisement, go ahead and put in title company. Again, make sure your contracts don't say just title company. It actually has the actual company. All right. And you'll find that either in the MLS or talking with the selling agent. Section 4.4.3, available funds. Buyer represents the buyer at the time of this date or at the date of this contract does or does not have the funds immediately verifiable and available in an amount not less than what? And there's a capital C here. Capital C, cash at capital C closing 4.1. So this dollar amount right here needs to be in the buyer's bank account in order to say does. If the buyer is getting their money from the sale of a conditional property, is that in their bank account? Absolutely not. It's in the equity of that property, and that's not verifiable. So when you have a buyer who's contingent upon the sale of a property or receiving money from all different places, they don't have it verifiable unless it's in their bank account. So oftentimes it's great to write a contract with does, but Many times you're going to write a contract where you have to select does not. It doesn't mean that your offer is weaker. It means that you need to explain a few things to the selling side to make your offer seem just as attractive as if they did have it. New loan. So you're either going to select conventional, FHA, or VA. Sometimes your buyer's kind of in a limbo state. They might be able to go FHA and they might be able to go conventional. Perfectly okay to select both if you don't know. But if you do know that they're going conventional, don't select both. It's just going to have you're going to have an unnecessary conversation with with the selling side. But let's say that this is a conventional loan and the buyer is using a CHFA down payment assistance program. Go ahead and put other, and so it's a conventional loan, and then with CHFA, okay, something like that. Just make sure you never, ever, 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 no matter if your buyer is using a CHFA loan or not, put in other right here and just state CHFA. CHFA is actually not a loan type, it's a down payment assistance program. So in all technicality, you actually don't have to select the checkbox other and put CHFA. I like to do it, and I'm teaching you guys how to be very transparent with the selling side to just cause a lot less headache down the road. But again, CHFA is not actually a loan type. You would have to select FHA or conventional. If the buyer is a VA buyer, then there is going to be no such thing as a down payment assistance program because VA buyers don't have to bring any money down. All right, this little blank here, I always leave this blank. I always leave it blank. This is for something that the seller should counter you on because it says seller agrees. And since I'm not working with the seller, I don't want them to agree to anything. So for the sake of our video, I'm going to say always leave. Let the selling side come back to you with a dollar amount that you have to talk to the buyer about. I almost guarantee they won't. So always leave it blank. Assumption, we're going to skip over that. Seller private financing, we're going to skip over that too. We're going to skip over financing because there's nothing to fill out here. So if we go down, there should be a little box. Where is it at? Yes, section 5.5. Buyer representation of the principal residence. Buyer represents the buyer will occupy the property as the buyer's principal residence unless the following box is checked. Buyer represents the buyer will not occupy this property as the principal residence. So be careful. Again, these things are worded kind of wild, but this is for loan fraud. This is for the sake that if an investor is buying the property, the lender needs to know that. And this is the buyer's, I forget what that word's called, but this is the buyer's testament to whether or not they are buying this as their primary property or not. So make sure you select this box if it's relevant for your situation. Scrolling right along to section 6.22. If there is an FHA, I get it, guys. I don't understand. I thought maybe they would change this heading, but this heading says FHA. But I need you to be aware that this actually applies for FHA and VA. So FHA and VA, even though it's not headed that way. So if you have a VA buyer, make sure you put something in here. I personally do not use a dollar amount, but you can. You can use $425, which is the purchase price. I personally just type in the words purchase price. That way, if we ever do an amendment to the purchase price, 425 doesn't stay linked. Like, let's say you did a price reduction because of an inspection, and now the property goes down from 425 to say 420. If I put in purchase price, then this condition follows that 420. If I put in 425 here, then I need to make sure in my amendment that I also recognize that this section 6.22 is changing. So I like the rule of thumb of purchase price. I know there's other brokers out there and other people out there that don't like that, but I personally love that it follows it and it doesn't allow me to have to think about amending something else down the road. Moving right along, cost of appraisal. The cost of the appraisal to be obtained after the date of this contract must be timely paid by 99.9% of the time, guys. If your buyer is the one hiring the lender, you're probably paying for that. In this market that we're in, we're seeing houses sit. We're seeing all sorts of strategy. And sometimes it's perfectly acceptable to ask the seller to pay for the buyer's appraisal, even though I'm still saying it's the buyer's appraisal. So for the sake of this thing, we're just going to maybe select both and confuse you guys now. I think I should just always make sure that this contract is left exactly the way we do it most often. So one of the things that I'm going to do after this video is I'm going to print this off like a PDF form, and I'm going to send this out with the videos. So those that want to watch the video once or twice can watch it once or twice, and then those that have a good handle on it don't need to hear my voice for hours and upon hours. They can look at a template and kind of use that there. All right. So owners association, there's nothing to fill out in this section here. We're going to move right along to section 8. Section 8, very few things to fill out, but you need to make sure you understand the importance of this. If you select this box, the seller is going to select title insurance company. That's very common. I think section 8.11 is always selected in my world. Every now and then, though, a seller will be using this title company that I don't recommend to the buyer. Should be some mom and pop shop down in Denver that just popped up. I don't know if that's a very viable thing to select an insurance company that could go under and then never pay out any insurance claims. So I always tell people, if the seller is offering title insurance through a very reputable title company, go ahead and let them, select the title company, because that's going to should be set forth up here in section 4 of the earnest money delivery. Yes, section 4, that's where you put the title company. So you should know whether it's a reputable title company or not. If you don't know, give me a call. I'm not going to discriminate from title companies. I'm going to give you some food for thought. I'm going to give you some things that allow you and the buyer to go do your own discovery process and allow the buyer ultimately to decide whether or not they're okay with it. But more often than not, I'm probably making a bigger deal out of this than there is. Seller selects. Abstracted title, we don't really need this anymore, so I would have to advise not to select that. If you do want to know more about what an abstracted title is, go ahead and take a Title 101 class or talk to a title rep. Like I said here, I'm just a licensed agent like you guys, and I am not fit to explain exactly what an abstracted title is. I just know that in 99.9, actually I'm probably at 100% at this stage. I've never asked for an abstracted title because it's kind of something that I don't want to say it's irrelevant. I just want you guys to seek that advice from a title rep. Okay? That's for if your buyer wants to select it. But let's go down here to owner's extended coverage. Again, if you don't know what owner's extended coverage is, ask a title rep. More often than not, this would probably be about 98% of the time in my career. Very rarely have I ever removed this and said will not. So will is very proper in this situation. Seller typically pays for this. It's about a don't quote me, right? Like every title company is a little different, but from the last time I checked, it was about a $75 charge, somewhere in there, give or take. All right, there's one little checkbox at the very, oh, nope, I forgot, there's a checkbox in there, still fill in the blank. If the property is in a special taxing district, you must put the special taxing district website here. It has to be the taxing district's website. It cannot be a generic website just labeling all the taxing districts that are out there. So there are third-party websites that you cannot put in this blank. You have to use the actual official website for the Metropolitan District. Tax certificate, again, typically, seller's paying for title insurance, seller wants to transfer the deed, seller should probably pay for tax certificate. But it is a nominal fee. Sometimes the buyer picks it up, just like sometimes the buyer wants to pick up the owner's extended coverage up here, which is $75 for give or take. The tax certificate is give or take around $25. All right. New ILC or survey. So again, if your buyer is using these dates and deadlines set forth in section 3, then you definitely need to make sure that you fill out this section. You can do a new ILC if that's what you want, or you can do a new survey. Each situation is specific to your buyer's needs and the seller's needs and what's going on. So I'm gonna just gloss past this, but if you have a question, obviously we at the office are here to help you guys with thinking through what you should ask for. I can't stress this enough. I know it's not really apparent to this section. It's apparent to everything. I oftentimes get asked questions after the fact, and it's a very I'm just gonna call it, it's annoying for me, but more than anything, it's not right in your world. Never ever ever fill out a contract, get it executed by one party or another, and then ask me clarifying questions, because oftentimes when you guys ask me a clarifying question, I'm telling you something needs to be changed. And it's just causing you so much more work. So I know the time is of the essence. You guys want to get contracts in, but I'm a human too, and I will absolutely get a hold of you and get your questions answered. But it is okay to hold off on sending in an offer for a couple of hours just to make sure you guys have everything buttoned up. I can't stress that enough. How many times somebody tells me, "Oops, man, I should have asked this beforehand." Actually, the sellers already have our offer, and now I'm going to feel like, how do I change this and resend it to them? Again, I'm probably, now we're talking about something that just is very irrelevant and doesn't need to happen if we just slow down, take our time, give myself a call, give Joanna a call, and then obviously, fill out the contract properly the first time. So ordering of the new ILCR survey could be buyer, could be seller. Payment could be buyer, could be seller. Every situation is different. Delivery of the new ILCR survey, but make sure you read this because a lot of times, people put in different things here, lender, whoever's aware and needs it. If my buyer's getting it, they're probably going to give me a copy. So I don't know if I need to put myself down here, but oftentimes what you see down here is that you put the agent. You can put agents party to the contract. You put agents. Capital A means the agent's party to the contract. All right, we are hammering through this. This is fantastic. Let's go. Section 10, I know there's not a lot to fill out, but I can't stress a couple of sections enough. Section 10 is one I would read over and over and over again, like the back of my hand. You really, 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 really want to pay attention to section 10.3. And the main reason is because when you do an inspection termination, you got to be careful if an inspection objection's already been sent. So again, I'm not going to give you all the nuts and bolts of these clauses. Make sure you read them and understand them. Due diligence. So we talked about that. Section 10.6. We talked about that all the way up at the top, right? We talked about due diligence documents, and we talked about leased items and encumbered items. So this is what that was referencing. Leased items here, 10.6.1.2. Encumbered items, 10.6.1.3. Occupancy agreements, 10.6.11. This is where you would put any of the leases. So if the property is, being rented, you're going to put in that lease. If the property has somebody that, parks an RV on it because it's an acreage property and the owners are getting $25 a month to have it sit out in their back lot, that's considered a lease. You need to spell those things out. Other documents. So other documents, you typically are going to ask for what's relevant and party to the contract. So if there's, let's say that there is a Generac generator that's, a backup generator that's being transferred with the property, you're going to want to ask for those documents. You're going to want to ask for all those different things. So other documents is oftentimes filled out because every property just has some nuances. So just make sure you understand it. That's what that's for, is all of those other kind of types of buyer questions and information that you would need from the seller. Conditional sale of the property. So again, up in our dates and deadlines section, we briefly talked about if the buyer has a conditional sale, a conditional property to sell, they would need to go ahead and list that property here. Don't use a legal description. Perfectly fine to use the common address or the mailing address. Once you do Main Street, blah, blah, blah. Source of potable water, section 10.8. Buyer does or does not acknowledge receipt of the seller's property disclosure. So call the source of potable water section, but don't gloss this over. Buyer does or does not acknowledge a receipt of the seller's property disclosure. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you feel like a nut, sometimes you don't. If there's a well, go ahead and leave this checkbox blank. If there is no well, go ahead and select that checkbox. For the sake of our video, I think I said that I did have a well on this property, so we're going to leave that blank. Buyer does or does not acknowledge a copy of the current well permit. So I don't know if we put to be determined or what, but let's pretend like we don't have a copy of the current well permit. All right. Closing instructions. Closing instructions are or not executed with this contract. Closing instructions. This is Colorado Real Estate Commission's closing instructions. So if it says Colorado Real Estate Commission and it's all in capital letters, that means that's an actual document. This is not like closing instructions. This is not like instructions from the title company on how they're going to conduct closing. This is an actual Colorado Real Estate Commission approved form. So if you don't have it executed, or not. It's perfectly fine. If you do have it executed with the buyer and seller, go ahead and put R. So oftentimes when I'm writing a contract, it's R not, because I just haven't executed things I don't need to execute until I know we have a contract. All right, section 12.3, closing. This is basically saying the hour and place of closing will be designated by. The rule of thumb here, you're going to see people put buyers and sellers. If the buyers and sellers can't come to an agreement, what happens? You're at this weird stalemate. So the newest era of contracts, you know, if I don't know what I'll call that, but the newest advice from our attorney and what we need to put in here is designated by agent. Works perfectly well. So that would be maybe you and the selling agent coordinating when you guys are actually taking and closing on the property. Title transfer, 99.9% of the time, you guys are going to use a special warranty deed or a general warranty deed. Never select both. I know the system allows you to select both. This time, only select one. So whether it's going to be a special warranty deed or general warranty deed, again, for the sake of this video, talk to your title company. I love when agents meet up with those reps to ask them these title nuance questions. So I don't want to sound like I know everything, especially when it comes to another area of our real estate world where they're the professional. So you will use special warranty, you will use general warranty, and then ever so often you will use a representative deed. That would be for someone who has passed, somebody maybe do a trust, something. Alrighty, moving right along. Section 15. This is so section 8 was probably, or I'm sorry, section 10 was probably the meatiest contract you need to know and understand about inspections and how they work. Section 15 is probably one of the more meaty sections around how and what in the world happens when there is a HOA involved. I'm not necessarily going to explain this all in detail, but what I'm going to tell you is a couple of rules of thumb. Section 15.2, closing service fee. This is not the closing cost to the lender. Everyone gets section 15.2 confused. The closing costs to the lender are like, you know, they're like $5,000 to $7,000 to $10,000 sometimes. Section 15.2 is not stating that the buyer wants the seller to pay half of those closing. It's a closing service fee. Closing service fees are anywhere between $400 and $500 right now is what I've seen as of late. So you decide, you and your buyer, are you going to make the buyer pay for it all? Are you going to have the seller pay for it? Or very commonly, I always use one half buyer, one half seller. Section 15.3 and down, this is going to be talking about the HOA. So I always tell people, when in doubt, if you're brand new, select one party or another. So if I'm selecting buyer here, then I'm going to go ahead and select buyer here, 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 and here. That's just my general rule of thumb, because a lot of times you guys aren't probably understanding what the local transfer tax looks like. You're not understanding what reserves and working capitals are. And oftentimes in a multiple offer situation, the buyer absolutely is going to want to kind of make their offer stand out. If you're not in a multiple offer situation and the seller is transferring the property, then I like the seller to pay. So more often than not, I would say over 50% of the time, I like to make sure all of these say seller. But sometimes in a competing offer situation, I'm going to go ahead and ask the buyer if they want to pay. All of these fees all combined add up to anywhere between about $300 and $1,000, give or take. So it's not a ton of money, but it can be for a buyer. So be very careful selecting those boxes on behalf of the buyer, in that that buyer may or may not have those funds to be able to satisfy at closing. So water transfer fees, you really shouldn't have any water transfer fees on most properties. So if there are water transfer fees, I definitely I assume that the seller should be telling us as the buying side that. So as far as the buying side goes, I always elect to just leave these blank unless I know. And the same goes for utility transfer fees. Many properties, you will not have any fees for these types of things, but every now and then you'll see if there are fees for these. I like to leave them blank and make it a point of contention later on. Or when in doubt, another thing that I like to teach is, since you don't know and you are on the buyer side, go ahead and put seller. That would be a nice when in doubt type of situation. So the more I do this, the more I work in this field of real estate, the more I'm leaning towards advising you guys to just go ahead and select seller, even if you don't know if there's a fee or not. Let the selling side counter you. Let the selling side do their due diligence on that, because again, they really should be the one telling the buyer side what that looks like. All right. First up, there's only one little checkbox here. This is if your seller is a foreign person, go ahead and select that box. If they're not a foreign person, then keep moving on. When it comes to foreign folks, a lot of times they will ask us if they have any tax implications. You need to set them up with a tax advisor. Remember, you're just a licensed agent trying to sell out a contract, and all you need to know is if they are a foreign entity or if they're not. All right, probations. I would say more often than not, you guys are always going to see and be advised that you're going to select the most recent mill levy. That's a very, in my world, a very fair way to divvy up taxes when it comes to property taxes at the end of closing. I think I digress, and I'm just going to say it like that. Rents, if there is a rental or a lease on the property, you're going to figure out how the buyer wants to, receive rents. I think that, you should do a cure, just because I'm an investor too. And, rents actually received, it's not my fault if the seller couldn't actually collect their own money. So I want the full lease amount, and that's what a cure would be. Other prorations. Most often this is left blank, guys, but every now and then you will see prorations for different things. So you do already automatically have the water and sewer charges. You have propane. That's a big one that gets prorated. But, every now and then you might have a water cistern where a seller wants prorated, half the amount and half the water's left. So oftentimes left blank, it's really going to be situational specific, but it is an important section if there is going to be something that is going to be prorated. Association assessments. By the closing date, the association will, any special assessment assessed prior to the closing date by the association will be the obligation of, and it's my full-hearted truth, my full heart of hearts says that the seller should pay for any special assessments that is going on with their property, because obviously they should make you aware of that as the buying side, and special assessments are pretty costly. Possession. This is basically saying, hey, if the seller doesn't deliver possession of the property, okay, that means the buyer can't actually move in. So if the buyer moves in, this fee doesn't mean anything. So this is if the seller fails to give the buyer possession of that property. I think it should be a very steep amount. And right now, the way hotel prices are, gas prices, moving fees, storage fees, I truly believe this stuff should be anywhere between $700 and maybe even like $1,200 per day. If that seller closes on the property and doesn't give your buyer possession, I think they should have some penalties. And $700 goes quick when you have extra holding fees for all the furniture and everything that needs to now be stored. You've got, you're eating out, or it's not you, it's the buyer, right? The buyer's got extra source fees. The buyer's now eating out a bunch. The buyer has to go put themselves up in a hotel room. What if the buyer has, a 4 or 5 person family? You're talking 2 or 3 different hotel rooms. So $700 might seem outrageous to some, but when you start to add it up, it seems pretty fair to the buying side for something that the seller is failing to do. I don't think there's anything in section 18. Section 20.1, always leave section 20.1.1 blank. Let's say it like that. Leave it blank. Leave it blank. Anyone have a discussion, leave it blank. Section 26, this is just stating how are things going to be delivered. I do see that people go ahead and put in here, maybe type in things like DocuSign. Some of you might start to adapt, even putting in the term bold trail, since we are using the signature source bold trail. SkySlope is another big one you'll see people use. But ultimately, I personally just says we can do stuff electronically. I personally leave it blank, but it's perfectly okay to use, yeah, it's perfectly okay to use whatever signature side you're looking at. All right, section 29. This one I think I will state and preach a little bit on, or get on my soapbox with if you want. But ultimately, I need you to understand this full-heartedly, because for any new agents, you guys don't know this, but our MLS used to state exactly what our buyer's agent commission was, and now it doesn't. And so I need you to understand some nuances here. More often than not, I'm just going ahead and selecting on section 29.1, and I'm putting my due commission in here, whatever percentage that is for you. I'm not going to state any percentage areas for the sake of this video, just simply because I don't know who's going to watch this, and we can't price fix, and I'm a big fan of what the commission says about commissions. Section 29.1, put whatever percentage amount you're charging the buyer right there. Remember, you can't ask the seller to pay you more than what you have stated in your exclusive right to buy. If the buyer's paying you the commissions, then you're going to select section 29.1, put your dollar amount right there. I personally hope that your buyer is not paying you the compensation amount, but obviously there are situations where it's perfectly due. Try to always get the, I shouldn't even say that, but I always try to get the selling side to pay it. I truly, in my heart of hearts, believe that the buyer's already putting down so much money for closing costs, down payment amounts, they've been saving, and now to pay their agent would be probably a difficult task for many buyers. So everything's situational specific. I don't mean to sound biased in any way, shape, or form, but I will tell you that, if I work on behalf of my buyer, my fiduciary duty is to my buyer, then I'm obviously going to ask for the seller to pay for it because it's on their behalf. That's how I should say that. Section 29.3, this would be another common way to do it. You can ask for the brokerage firm of the You could ask for the seller's brokerage firm to pay the buyer's brokerage firm the commission amount. But in this situation, if you put this, you need to have what's called a brokerage to brokerage compensation form agreement filled out. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to pull open that document, but go search it, find it. It is a commission approved form now. I believe it's a commission approved form. But anyways, it's a form that you would need to have if you're using section 29.3. So when in doubt, go ahead and use section 29.1 and know to put your commission amount or compensation amount there. Additional provisions, you name it. You can have a whole ton of additional provisions. For the sake of this video, I'm not going to draw up any sort of scenarios. Let's keep moving on. But over time, you will start to see why and the rhyme or reason of why this section exists. All right, documents party to this contract. The following are a part of this contract: post-closing occupancy agreement. So if you are doing a post-closing occupancy agreement, and let me just scroll up here and show you exactly what I mean by that. If you're using a post-closing occupancy agreement, then your closing date is going to be different than the possession date. So remember up here, I was saying, if you close on the same day, you can go ahead and put upon delivery of deed. But if you are closing anytime after the 19th, then you would need to put, a time down here. I don't care if it's 8 a.m. or 8 p.m. Talk to your buyer about that. And then anytime after, you would absolutely need to have a post-closing occupancy agreement filled out. Take a look at that document, pretty self-explanatory on how to fill it out. The only note that I'll add about the post-closing occupancy agreement is simply that the state of Colorado says that rent cannot be more than double the security deposit amount. I'm so sorry. Like totally backwards. The security deposit amount cannot be more than double the rent amount. So if the rent amount is $1,000, then the security deposit can be only a maximum of $2,000. If you guys are looking to give the seller free rent, then you can't charge a security deposit, because 2 times 0 is 0. And it would be an illegitimate type of document, because it would go against Colorado law. All right, I digress on that little guy. Moving on, you're going to have the buyer's name that pulls up here, and the buyer's signature down here, seller's name and signature. Look at this here. We have end of contract. So anything below this little line here is between just the brokers. So it is nice to make sure you guys understand how to fill this out. Broker does or does not acknowledge receipt of the earnest money deposit. I typically don't ask my buyers for earnest money until we have an executed contract. I'm probably working with the buyer's agent, as you should with most cases. And then go ahead and sign here. I don't know why this actually says, oops, this should say Blake Smith. Maybe I changed up something, I don't know. Yeah, anyways, that should say Blake Smith. Play around with it. But that's the end of our video, guys. That's the end of the contracts. Like I said, I'm going to go ahead and get this PDF so that way you guys can have the video as well as the PDF.